Mark Carney has an alarming plan to radically change Canada. A plan seen in a series of bills
that may have decent stated intentions, but if passed, could bring
new censorship and give his government sweeping new powers to do things like shutting off your internet
and possibly usher in a cashless society and even shut down the social media platform X.
And no, I am not exaggerating.
If that becomes law, I think that X is toast in Canada.
My name is Ellie. I've worked in Canadian politics for the last decade, and for the past 6 years, I've covered it as a political journalist. And after reviewing and analyzing the bills that Mark Carney has introduced since he's taken office, and speaking with a prominent constitutional lawyer,
I discovered something very disturbing,
which I will explain to you in 5 simple parts. And be sure to watch this video until the end for a warning about what Canada could become if Carney gets his alarming agenda through. But first, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you value independent, non-government funded journalism, then become a channel member or Patreon member. Journalism and commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
Rebuild the foundation. You have to retell the story. Market conservative other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. I think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged with.
Part 1, Bill C-9. The first piece of legislation that is part of Mark Carney's alarming agenda to radically change Canada is Bill C-9, an act to amend the criminal code regarding hate propaganda, hate crimes, and access to religious or cultural place. This is the Carney government's signature anti-hate bill, and it was introduced amidst Jewish groups pressuring the government to do something about the pro-Hamas protests that have targeted synagogues. But this bill goes far beyond that and has some serious implications for the free speech rights of ordinary Canadians. That is what Josh DeHaas told me. He is a lawyer with the Canadian Constitution Foundation. You may remember him from a previous video I did on Mark Carney's dangerous attempt to rewrite the Canadian Constitution through the courts, which I encourage you to watch after this video if you have not already.
The bill would ban using certain symbols that are associated with terrorist groups, and it would also ban particular symbols that are considered anti-Semitic, so, Nazi symbols. The problem with this is that, first of all, you should never be banning symbols because it's just such a slippery slope.
But that is not all that this bill does. It does other things that are concerning.
It also lowers, in our opinion, the definition of hatred in hate speech. And over the years, the courts have defined what hatred means, and they've set a pretty high bar, which is that hatred is not merely offensive or repugnant speech. It's the most extreme manifestations of the emotion described by the word vilification and detestation. But this bill would create in law a lower standard that doesn't include the word extreme. So that's worrying to us because it shows that the government wants to see more hate crime charges. And the problem with that, again, is that you have a right to offensive speech. You don't have much free speech if you can't, speak freely and offend people.
And even more concerning than that is that this bill could be used to criminalize parts of the Bible.
So one of the defenses to criminal hate speech charges is that if you're making a religious argument in good faith, you won't be found guilty of that charge. The Bloc right now has sort of the kingmaker vote on all of these committees because of the way the last parliament turned out, and they said we're not going to let Bill 9 go through unless you get rid of the religious exemption.
So the Liberal Attorney General agreed to remove the religious exemptions to please the Bloc Québécois.
The concern here is that, preachers, Christian preachers who have a difference of opinion on that type of issue are now going to face either calls to be charged or actual charges, if not convictions.
However, the CBC reported that Mark Carney's office had not approved this radical compromise, and the bill was stalled. Part 2, Bill C-8. The second bill that is part of Carney's alarming agenda is Bill C-8, an act respecting cybersecurity, amending the Telecommunications Act, and making consequential amendments to other acts. The main goal of this bill is to prevent major cyber attacks. However, this bill would give the Carney government sweeping new powers, including the power to shut off your internet. That is what the Haas explained.
They want to put all of this power in the hands of the Minister of Industry, which is currently Mélanie Joly. It would allow the minister to secretly order telecom providers to cut off internet of individuals. And the minister would get this power as long as she has reasonable grounds to believe that it's necessary to do so to secure the telecom system against any threat. That's not the type of power we want to give governments lightly, especially considering this is the same government that froze people's bank accounts during the Freedom Convoy protests.
Part 3, Bill C-2 and Bill C-12. Next in Mark Carney's alarming agenda is Bill C-2, an act respecting certain measures related to the security of the border between Canada and the United States, which is merged into Bill C-12. While the purpose of Bill C-2 is to secure Canada's border, something that arguably the Liberals failed to do for 10 years under Justin Trudeau, the bill actually paved the way for sweeping new surveillance powers for Carney's government.
It would give Canada Post the ability to just open your letter mail, and they would be able to do this primarily to look for fentanyl, which is transported sometimes in just envelope-sized packages. But there's no safeguards built in here to ensure they're not reading your mail.
But that's not all that this bill seeks to do.
This would allow the government to, and not just police, but also other parts of the government, to demand certain information called subscriber information from anyone that provides you services without a warrant. So, police could go to like a dating app that you subscribe to and ask, did you provide services to this person? Which municipality did you provide it to? And for how long? Which doesn't seem like a lot of information, but it's not necessarily information police should have without a warrant.
Bill C-2 also paves the way to making Canada a cashless society by banning the use of cash for transactions over $10,000. Now, this is being justified as a way to combat money laundering. That said, doing this is a slippery slope.
We don't want to see a slippery slope where that $10,000 gets lowered and lowered and lowered, because cash in some ways is privacy, right? It allows us to buy things and sell things without the government knowing.
The initial Bill C-2 was so controversial that the Carney government opted to put the less controversial parts into another border bill, Bill C-12. That said, we are not out of the woods when it comes to Bill C-2.
So they took out all of the parts that don't raise civil liberties concerns for us and put them in C-12, which will probably pass quite quickly, but they've said they want to bring C-2 back, and they're serious about that.
Part 4, the Liberals' censorship culture. There is a culture of censorship that has defined the Liberal Party of Canada since it took power in 2015. And as we will see in Part 5, Carney's proposed bills, combined with the bills passed under Justin Trudeau, would radically transform the fabric of Canada, arguably for the worse. The first big piece of liberal censorship legislation came all the way back in 2016, and it was Bill C-16. This bill added gender identity and gender expression to the list of protected grounds under the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Canadian Criminal Code. This was the bill that Jordan Peterson famously spoke out against, warning that it could lead to compelled pronoun use. And then came Bill C-11. This bill granted the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, or CRTC, unprecedented authority to regulate online content, which set alarm bells in the creator community. And then came Bill C-18, which has resulted in the censorship of independent media organizations, because in response to this bill, Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, opted to block news links and block news outlets from the platforms. This has meant that independent media outlets lost as much as 50% of their traffic, have lost revenues, and meanwhile, the legacy media has enjoyed government subsidies, meaning that the people who are supposed to hold the state and power accountable are increasingly reliant on that state and power. But the worst censorship bill that the Liberals tried to introduce under Trudeau was Bill C-63. This bill would have done four main things. First, it would have created a digital safety commissioner with the power to force tech companies to remove content that the government deems hateful. Second, it would have required the mandatory removal of online child material, which, for the record, I'm totally okay with. The people who make or consume this content are absolutely disgusting. Third, it would have created a preemptive system allowing judges to impose conditions on people accused of being about to commit a hate crime. Fourth, it would have expanded the powers of the Canadian Human Rights Commission to investigate and fine individuals for allegedly discriminatory online speech, including through anonymous complaints.
This would have been one of the most extreme and frightening restrictions on free speech that you could imagine.
This bill thankfully died in Parliament when Trudeau prorogued Parliament. That said, Carney is also relooking to reintroduce it.
Is your government interested in regulating tech companies to protect against online harms?
As you know, I have, when I was first Heritage Minister, worked on this. We've tabled legislation in the previous Parliament. This is something that we're very concerned at and we're looking at very closely.
But will you be retabling some version of Bill C-63?
We're looking into this as we speak.
And the House has warned that even if the new version is not as extreme, it could still have serious implications, even if it just means reintroducing it with the Digital Safety Commissioner, because that alone could mean the shutting down of social media platform X, known for being a very pro-free speech platform that liberals hate.
If they brought back the Digital Safety Commissioner, if that becomes law, I think that X is toast in Canada. I don't think you could have a free speech platform like X and also have the so-called duty to act responsibly and take down harmful content.
Part 5, where this is headed. If Mark Carney's alarming agenda to radically change Canada passes, we do not need to imagine what Canada will look like. There is already a real-world example, and it is the United Kingdom. In the UK, legislation similar to what Mark Carney is trying to pass has led to wide-scale censorship, including censorship of online speech. According to data obtained by the Times of London, police departments in the UK average 30 arrests a day for posts on the internet deemed to be offensive. That's nearly 11,000 per year. Egregious examples of censorship from the UK include Graham Linehan, the Father Ted co-creator, being arrested by 5 armed officers at Heathrow Airport upon returning to the UK from the US, over 3 old ex-posts criticizing gender ideology, a woman being put in jail for 36 hours over a social media post that contained a mild accuracy and that she had deleted within hours, a couple being arrested over comments they posted in a private WhatsApp groups for parents at their children's school, a woman being convicted of a homophobic hate crime for using the F slur in private text messages to describe a man she alleges assaulted her. She was criminally charged despite being the victim, and a woman was arrested for silently praying near an abortion clinic.
I think there's a possibility that we do become like the UK, which has become extremely authoritarian on freedom of speech, also often selectively enforced. It seems to be enforced more against native Britons, for example, than immigrants.
And while the House has expressed some skepticism that Canada could become worse than the UK when it comes to censorship, I believe this is a real possibility, and here's why. Journalist Tristan Hopper wrote a book called Don't Be Canada: How Everything Went Wrong at Once. And talking about his book, he noted, about 10 years ago, particularly in the last 5, the way Canada was being mentioned internationally started to shift. We were frequently mentioned as a model of what not to do. In the book, which I have read and highly recommend you do as well, Hopper explains how poorly written or badly thought out legislation and policies repeatedly created catastrophes. Bad gender policies have led to extreme examples of gender ideology. Bad maid legislation has turned Canada into a maid nightmare. Bad immigration policies have caused chaos and disorder. Bad housing policy has driven housing prices through the roof. And bad so-called harm reduction policies have only escalated harm.
And now, Carney has introduced a series of badly written bills which give his government sweeping new powers, and if history is any guide, it could once again lead to catastrophe for the Canadian people.
My friends, Mark Carney's plan to change Canada through a series of bills that, if passed, could bring wide-ranging censorship, new government surveillance, as well as give Carney's government new big powers to do things like shut down your internet, the ushering in of a cashless society, and the
possible shutting down
of social media platform X, something that would make Canada worse than the United Kingdom, is radical and alarming. But more importantly, it must be stopped. If you agree that Mark Carney needs to abandon this agenda
and instead introduce policies that will actually address the problems he claims he's trying to solve,
then sign the petition below. Until next time, God bless.